My name is Bukira Ahom Maria. I'm Programs Officer with the Women's Pro Bono Initiative, and I'm humbled to be representing our Executive Director, Ms. Prima Kwagala. She sends in her regrets and apologies. She's unable to make it because she's unwell, but I believe that I'll be able to deliver. Your Lordship, the Honorable Lady Justice, the President ULS Online, our partners from UNAIDS, senior counsel present in the room, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you're most welcome. The Women's Pro Bono Initiative's vision is a Uganda free of violence and discrimination against women and girls. But from the wider spectrum of advocacy, we also look at issues concerning women, but also the society in which we live in. And HIV is a pandemic that has plagued our nation, has plagued the country worldwide. And this toolkit is something that we have been working on with the basis that it shall be something that will benefit the society as a whole, but also the human rights-based approach. It's something that should not be kept only within the legal profession, but should be known by more people. And your presence here to launch this toolkit is most valued. The UNAIDS 2030 agenda for zero stigma and zero infections and to end HIV is very vital. And we believe this toolkit that we've been working on with our head consultant, Mr. Kabanda, will be very beneficial to everyone. And it is something that we look forward to launching today. The society in which we lived in is a society that has discrimination and stigma. And stigma is not something that's only faced by people because of their socio-economic standing, but it's also something that they face because of their health status. And as an organization that advocates against violence, a society free from violence against women and girls, it's also an organization that advocates for a society that's free from violence against people living with HIV, against marginalized people, against people who do not have people who defend them. And as a bigger part of our advocacy journey, we believe this is a toolkit that will have sustainability beyond today's event. It's a toolkit that will be used in courtrooms. It's a toolkit that will be used in classrooms. It's a toolkit that will be used by everyone across. And we thank you so much for taking off your time, even amidst the scares, and being present here. We value your presence. And we believe today is going to be a fruitful engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for those opening remarks. And I would like to encourage those who are online to register in the chat room, because it's very important that we track your registration, because this is going to help us in dissemination of this toolkit. So at this point, I would like to invite the president of the Uganda Law Society, Madam Fiona Wall, who is online, to make her remarks. I request the president to unmute and give her speech. please unmute and be able to speak. Oh, okay. The president has gone off because of network challenges, but we're hoping to have her back as soon as possible. So at this point, we shall continue our program as we wait for the president to come back online. Then we can have our remarks from the representative from UNAIDS. Mr. Tim, the floor is yours.
So the global partnership was established after a public call for action um, to end HIV-related stigma and discrimination. This call was called to reinvigorate the political commitment by member states, by the United Nations, civil society organizations, and communities to end HIV-related stigma and discrimination. As the legal fraternity, we've been worried when we see some of the cases being passed, when we see colleagues going to Luzira and then being acquitted later after some time. And we're wondering what is happening. Are we all following up with the science of HIV? We feel that most of what is happening is driven by stigma and discrimination, including what we see in the media. Mother nurse, you know. The removal of barriers that stigma and discrimination create to accessing HIV prevention, testing, treatment, and care services is key to ending the HIV epidemic as a global threat by 2030. If we continue having a lot of stigma amongst us, all of us, I think, have a relative who is HIV positive, and all of us maybe have heard of a situation where a child has been denied admission. We've been receiving cases of kids, doing so well and putting their first choice Namagunga, Gayaza, very bright children, born positive, but very healthy. And then when you go to declare to the school nurse that this child is healthy, but she's on this medication, then you are told, sorry, I think take the child to another place. We don't admit those kind of children here. And the excuse they'll give, we don't have special diet, the school sick bay is small, the nurse is not well qualified. And all these are different forms of stigma and discrimination that affect access to education. Because for such a child, she was aiming at becoming a lawyer like yourselves, a doctor, a teacher. But eventually, you end up looking for another school. And then she has got 4 or 5, which is very unfair. So we need to remove this barrier that stigma and discrimination creates based on perceptions which are not true. Because if a child is in class and learning with others, You can share a pen, you can share a book, you can share the ball, and really there shouldn't be danger to any child. So the Global Partnership aims to urgently accelerate the implementation and scaling up evidence-based programs and initiate forms of HIV discrimination. It also aims to close the data gap, to inform policy and program implementation, and to demonstrate measurable progress towards eliminating all forms of HIV-related stigma and discrimination. The focus is on people being left behind in the HIV response, including people living with HIV. Often we even discuss plan for people living with HIV without them being in the room. Very many times we don't call the school children. They don't know, they do not tell you what happens. You know, when the school nurse is bored, then she has a topic for discussion with other teachers. Hey, you see that child? And that alone affects, but we don't ever get to hear these stories. For us who work in this space, actually there's a girl who is working now with Uganet who decided to become a lawyer because of that. She kept moving from one school to another until she wondered, now me, what am I going to do? I also need to study, you know? We have adolescent girls and young women. We all know the HIV epidemic is high in this category. We have migrants and some indigenous populations. We have key populations, including gay men and other men who have sex with men, sex workers, transgender people, people who inject drugs, prisoners, and other incarcerated people. Up to now, you go to Mulago, in these some of the, what do they use? Those clinics which are supposed to be giving care that is not discriminatory. And the counselor or the nurse, instead of examining you and medicating you, first begins by asking, but really with all this beauty, is the best they could do sex work? I have come to tell you I'm having a terrible problem. I cannot sit, I cannot stand. You are first seeing sex work. And then you begin quoting from the Bible. By the time you're done, the patient is more sick and not interested in coming back for care. We all know how our constitution treats other key populations, such as men who have sex with men. And we can see that these categories actually are driving the epidemic. It's very unfortunate that we do not realize that in all these categories, we all have sex with them, all of us in this room. The sex worker may have sex with your husband tomorrow, with your son, with your brother. The prisoners, we all know what happens when they're in prison, including engaging in anal sex, and not necessarily because they are from that orientation. People who inject drugs, sharing syringes. Many of us are now struggling with children counseling. Unless we are not in Uganda, we have very many children who are doing drugs, only that some of us are not aware. But it's a big problem, and I hope with this lockdown, you've been counseling your children, talking to them, not necessarily checking their suitcases and everything, but the rate of use of these substances is high in secondary schools now. Transgender people and others. So if we continue leaving a subpopulation behind, and this population is having sex with all of us, then we are not doing any justice for ourselves. And indeed, we will see the country having increased new HIV infections, and especially among adolescent girls and young women who we know are more vulnerable. So the Global Partnership has 3 objectives. One is to support fulfillment of commitments. It puts into action the human rights obligations of member states to end stigma and discrimination, already made at the global, regional, national level towards eliminating HIV-related stigma and discrimination. By the way, there are places of work. I won't mention some of them, very serious places of work, where when you join, one of the things you'll be told you need to go for medical checkup. Unfortunately, they don't tell you what they are checking you for. But that may be a reason for you not to be given a particular post or to have your contract ended and not renewed. We all know that those who are seeking for jobs, since there are no jobs here, and they want to go to those, some of these Arab countries, they are screened for HIV. That's the first test. and it's called medical checkup. And then when you go to pick, you've already got you've paid the money they've asked for, then you're expecting your air ticket, and then they say you failed the exams. Then you failed exams. Which exams? Medical checkup. But it's in that bracket. But it's actually what they screen for. If you talk with all of them, it's HIV. HIV cannot stop you from washing plates, from scrubbing the floor, from walking on the roads. So really, it should not be used as a basis to deny others access to livelihoods. Also, the second objective is build meaningful partnerships. It establishes, strengthens, revitalizes partnerships among stakeholders to implement and scale up programs towards ending HIV-related stigma and discrimination. Without us ending inequalities, without us ending stigma and discrimination, we are going nowhere. Share responsibility for measurement and accountability. It will collect and disseminate data to inform policy and programming, measure progress, and support accountability towards eliminating of HIV-related stigma and discrimination. At one time, we're writing a proposal, and then we're asking, but the key populations are becoming so many. In Busia, there are so many sex workers. The truck drivers, wherever they park, you'll just see an escalation of HIV. Why don't we have proper programming? And they said, we don't have data. How many are they? Surely, if we want to have data for anything, we can. Since we can do, we do have sensors here when we need to get any information. So when we always use excuses to leave some few people behind, I believe as the legal fellows, I think you should take this upon yourselves because like someone sang, today it's me, tomorrow it's someone else. Next slide, please. So the settings that the global partnership focuses on are the healthcare setting. I have already mentioned about healthcare workers and how they are behaving. The workplace, where you are given in the contract, in many places of work, you can be terminated based on your health. And the excuse they always give is, oh, you see, they'll take you for counseling and they tell you your continued employment with us may put you to more danger and more risk. Really, the thing is, you're just eliminating someone because you think they are going to incur a lot of health-related costs to you. However, when they are very healthy, you want to utilize them maximally. Education, I've already talked about it. The justice, I don't know, we are looking at the law and then we are looking at the HIV science. We all know that EMTCT is there. When you have a non-detectable viral load, we are all having negative babies, but still we don't know why the science is not matching what is happening in the courts of law. Individual, household, and community, we have known how many discordant couples we have, and if it is the woman, what happens? The whole clan sits and says, now this one should go away. Though the woman, if the man is positive, should not go away and should continue taking care of the man. We have emergency and humanitarian settings. Those of us who work here, for example, we know refugees who come from Congo. Out of every 10, it's estimated about 5 to 6 have experienced sexual violence, including children as young as 5. These focus areas are proposed because they are settings in which different forms of stigma and discrimination and violence occur, including intersectional discrimination, disproportionately affecting people being left behind in the HIV response. When you are a refugee, even in Mulago there, by the way, they go and then they are trying to talk and they say, I'm not a Somali speaking Luganda. Sure, you can't learn Luganda when you've just arrived from Somali the other day. It's not easy when you're an adult. And we at times don't appreciate what refugees go through. And I know now with the bombs and everything that is happening, whenever there seems to be insecurity, there is a way our attitude towards refugees also changes. And yet, the people who may be actually part of such dealings are not necessarily refugees, because refugees most times are the poor of the poorest who eventually see there's no one can protect me and take off. They do not have any connections. They have left everything back home. It's just like right now we are here and then there's a bomb and we are told, okay, now this time it is not ISIS or whoever, but it's a government overthrow. And we find ourselves in Sudan. Your children find themselves in Tanzania. and your mother finds herself in Kenya. By the time they are arriving there, they really need support, but we don't look at them in that manner. Even when we stay with the people in our villages, in our communities, they always go Bakongo, eh? Abo Basomali. But they have come here not because they don't love to be at home, but because the situation at home is not good. And they just need a little bit of kindness. These three focus areas, like I've said, are proposed because they enable greater non-contestation when addressing sensitive issues and increase chances of political and financial investment to create stigma-free HIV responses. There are also areas in which various UNAIDS co-sponsors and key partners like the Global Fund and PEF are already leading work. So as UNAIDS, as other UN agencies, we realize already the healthcare setting is one of the settings that there are challenges. The workplace setting is problematic. The education setting has issues. The justice setting, we've been crying tears at times because of some of what we see and failure by colleagues to access justice. Individual, household, and community settings, I think every now and then there are women and men looking for counseling because of what they are going through. Emergency and humanitarian settings, I've already talked about it as well. And these are settings which many of us are already doing work in, PEPFAR, Global Fund, and others. Next slide, please. So national actions to eliminate stigma and discrimination. There are many of them, but what we've committed to and what we must do as a country is promote non-discriminatory access to healthcare, employment, education, and social services, eliminate HIV-related stigma and discrimination, eliminate gender inequalities, and end all forms of violence and discrimination against women and girls, review and reform laws that reinforce stigma and discrimination, including the age of consent, HIV non-disclosure, exposure and transmission, travel restrictions, and mandatory testing. Empower people living with or at risk of or affected by HIV to know their rights and access justice and legal services. We've seen very many women being thrown out of their house by their spouses. And yet the spouses at that time also don't know their HIV status. You see, for a woman, it's very complicated. The moment you get pregnant and you want to access antenatal care, it is compulsory that you're screened for HIV. And the moment it's positive and you are the first to declare the status, then it is you who brought it. When many times actually you are very innocent and equally very shocked and needing some counseling and help. Next slide, please. The Global Partnership initiatives also address critical cross-cutting issues, including the impact of harmful gender, social, and cultural norms and practices, including wife inheritance. One time I was listening to actually Family Matters. One of our cousin brothers passed on, and he was a soldier. And of course, those of us who were close to him knew what he had died from. We used to counsel him. He was HIV positive. It came as a shock. He failed to accept the situation. He deteriorated and he died. Unfortunately, one of my aunties had picked a very young bride for him. The girl was in senior too. And at the burial, they were discussing, but this girl is very young. So I think so and so you take her, or so and so, who is marrying this girl, she's still very young, and this child must grow here. And she was just seated there. She was not saying anything, like a thing, not even as a human being. But also I was wondering. We all saw the symptoms. We saw what the late went through. Isn't someone worried? Whom are they passing this lady to? Of course, it's good to have social protection for these young women. And this was a very young girl, by the way. But the way the excitement was among these younger boys and men to inherit, Moba, she was a very brown, nice-looking girl. I worried. I looked at it as a form of, a very loud form of gender-based violence. And I even tried to talk with my aunt. I said, but don't we think this girl should tell us if she even wants to still stay here? She's young. She can go and get married somewhere else. Hey, no. They paid cows. And even they have not finished 2 years, even see the baby is very young. But I don't even understand which part of the clan you are. I said, me, I'm the part of human rights. But in the clan, and also, now I'm on the side of women. If it were me, I even asked her if it were me. You've picked me from school, and you are the one who connected this girl to the late brother. She came, she's a virgin. She has got HIV. She has got pregnant. You are now sending her even almost there's nothing you are giving her. They're even struggling for the small money, which was supposed to be passed on to her. And now you even want to distribute her. You go, I think so and so, or that one, or, and these things still happen. And I'm hopeful that as you continue to administer justice, you'll be cognizant of this and eliminate some of this for those of us and others who cannot speak for themselves. Sexual and gender-based violence, the legal and policy environment, some sections of the HIV Prevention and Control Act. I don't know how they ended up there because I knew the legal fraternity was following this law. But some of these things, when they made it to the law, we were all shocked because people had been involved, and we were expecting all of you to say, no, this law can't pass in its current form. Section 171 of the Penal Code, among others, infringe on enjoyment of rights by people living with HIV in their diversity. People living with HIV are doctors, are engineers, are lawyers, are sex workers, are everybody. So we don't believe in when one is not free, then we are all not free. So for us, we believe that we move together and everybody must be catered for. The impact of gender, social, and economic inequalities is one of the other cross-cutting issues that we should be working on. Social protection policies, communication, and the media. We all know how the media, the other time we are having a discussion with MC Katz, and we're saying, but Salome, do you know that mine was forced disclosure? Because I was still waiting. But as I was losing weight, everybody was talking. Then baby girl went to the media and she was really very unhappy, saying this, saying that. So I had to come out and say something. But you see, when you are forced to disclose before you're prepared, you crumble after. And then you need counseling. And then the society is judgmental. And everybody is attacking and nobody is helping and doesn't help. So we need, as we continue with our work, to educate the media, some of the things they report, the way the event is presented, even just violence against women, the pictures and the heading, the headline. You really wonder, is this person having any humanity left in them? Next slide, please. So partnerships, Uganda has persistently passed laws to aggravate offenses if committed by people living with HIV in their diversity. Furthermore, there has been limited engagement of legal professionals in HIV-related matters. And this is one of the reasons we thought, as UNAIDS, rather than being on this side and saying, but why are they not doing this? Why can't they see? But the science is already saying U equals U. Undetectable equals untransmittable. But nobody is talking to the other side. So we thought that maybe we first talk with them and then we see how they can help us. The same to the media. Maybe we bring media on board so that they can understand, so that they can be interested in reading more about HIV, so that they can even interact with the family and friends of whom they are reporting as affected, and then we work together to change the status quo. So it's against this background that UNAIDS partnered with the Women Pro Bono Initiative as an implementing agency to strengthen the knowledge of legal practitioners and advocates on HIV and the law to promote increased access to justice for key populations, people living with HIV, and others who are left behind. I believe there are so many others that may not be mentioned here, but we all hear what is happening. We know what happens in prisons. If you're on ARV medication, TB medication, then you have to dig, I don't know from here up to where, for how long, and then you have to take those tablets with that portion, which may not even be enough if it were you. Being in prison, I think, is for rehabilitation, not a punishment. And that's how we end up finding many of those who are living with HIV or TB actually are dying before even the sentence is over because of the environment they live in. So as Land comrades, as those on the other side of the bar, we always look to you to just make sure that Uganda is for all of us, the world is for all of us. Nobody is disadvantaged or nobody is being discriminated against or criminalized because of a disease which is not out of their choice. Some are born with it. And I believe that we can do better in ensuring that we all enjoy human rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Solomon, for, for that very detailed presentation. She has let you know that UNAIDS is committed to eliminating HIV by 2030, and the greatest impediment is the stigma and discrimination. At I remember at the height of stigma and discrimination, when Phil Bongole Lutaya came out to disclose his status, he sang a song called Alone and Frightened. And he was trying to show the stigma and how he was alone in a world where he thought that no one wanted to associate with him. And so we thank UNAIDS for the work that they are doing and the commitment and the partnerships that they have set up. So at this point, I would like to invite the president of the Uganda Law Society, Fiona Wall, who is online, to make her to give us her communication. Madam President, the floor is yours. Madam President, please go on. We can hear you.
We have strategic objective number 3, which is to promote the rule of law and human rights. And we want to congratulate the pro bono, the Women's Pro Bono Initiative for this toolkit. Want to thank them for their determination in coming up with it. Want to thank the partners. It's very important in these days where COVID has taken attention away from very important health issues. We've seen maternity wards being turned into, emergency care units for COVID-19. We've seen HIV and AIDS issues take a back seat. Right now, as we speak, when we look at the levels of, STBB, especially among young people, the teenage pregnancies, we're told about 38,000 girls have gotten pregnant in this 1 year of COVID. We have about 1 in every 4 girls now, 1 in every 4 teenage girls under 18 now is pregnant in Uganda. And for me, that statistic just shows the levels to which we've gone. We've lost all the progress that we've made over the years. And HIV is one of these things, because if these girls, if 1 in every 4 is pregnant, that means that is a huge number of girls that have been involved in unprotected sexual intercourse, which means that they're exposed to HIV. In a few years, we're probably going to have a huge problem unless we deal with HIV. We have to deal with the human rights aspect of HIV, and I want to congratulate everybody for this toolkit. I want to thank my Lord Justice for being part of this initiative, and we're looking forward to the keynote. And our objectives as the Uganda Law Society are in consonance with the concept for this dissemination. And as a society, initiative to give you a moment where you can disseminate this into the wider audience of the Uganda Law Society, so that we can actually ensure that the rights of people living with HIV are protected. Um, we have 21 clinics that deal with legal aid services in the country, and we are hoping that we'll be able to have this toolkit availed to each of our clinics. We'll avail our officers for training, because the people living with HIV have peculiar needs that need to be taken into consideration. There's a lot of things that happen in the workplace. There's a lot of things that happen to widows of HIV positive people and their children born with HIV, um, accessibility to drugs, healthcare, food, and all sorts of things, even in the prison. We need to look into these things because I think that HIV has taken a huge backseat in policy, and yet it is still very much with us.
So HIV-related legal services are essential to protect and promote the rights of people living with HIV, and are essential to ensure good public health outcomes. This HIV service related legal services will help build and sustain an environment for effective HIV testing, treatment, and prevention. With legal assistance, people living with HIV can secure and protect their legal rights, and legal services can help provide concrete solutions to these HIV-related legal and social problems. It's therefore my belief that this dissemination meeting and launch of the toolkit is going to be the birth of a national network of lawyers, social justice actors, and judicial practitioners with knowledge and capacity to support in
She just lost network. She lost network. Battery.
The president has lost a network again. Some of the challenges of a third world country, but we picked a bit of what she said. She's very thankful for the toolkit that has been developed, and she has made a commitment that the Uganda Law Society will be able to avail their centers and offices for purposes of disseminating this toolkit. And as the Women's Pro Bono Initiative, we can't be more thankful. So without wasting more time at this point in time, we are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is having the key note and remarks from the bench. So ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, allow me invite the Honorable Lady Justice Kazari Olive Mokwaya. She's going to be able to give us the keynote, and please put your hands together for her.
Not that we are in court. It's just I find it so cool sometimes. When you're standing up, you realize that by God's grace you've been given. Is it okay? Okay. You realize that by God's grace you've been given a set of organs. You have limbs. you have a brain, and you have all these things that help you function as a human being. That's your toolkit as a human being. So you should thank God for that. Have a seat. Mhm. I am here in the delegated responsibility from the Honorable, the Principal Judge, who was invited to launch this toolkit, and I'm happy to be here. I'm the country representative, UNAIDS, the President, Uganda Law Society, the Executive Director, Women's Pro Bono Initiative, the Head, Department of Law Reporting, Research and Law Reform, Law Development Center, the consultant, distinguished legal practitioners, ladies and gentlemen. Several years ago, as a chief magistrate at Buganda Road Court, I had the duty of adjudicating over a matter on this highly controversial and emotive subject, which was largely unprecedented at the time when I handled it. Clearly, to me, it continues to be a very pertinent and pressing issue, which requires a focused and practical response. Today, my 10-minute role is to give a judicial perspective on how key populations, and I thank the speaker who spoke on behalf of UNAIDS for defining what key populations is. I didn't know what it was until you spoke. Key populations and persons living with HIV/AIDS are discriminated against within the criminal justice system in Uganda. It is a fact that the judicial function comes at the tail end of this issue. The executive arm of government is enjoined and makes policy on the issue. The legislature, with consultation with the people of Uganda, makes the law, and the judiciary adjudicates cases arising from these policies and laws. So I'm going to stick to my lane. I know you called this a keynote. Maybe it will become clear after Mr. Kabanda as a consultant. But I found it ironic that the judiciary would make the keynote address in this particular scenario. I thought it would be UNAIDS, but I'm learning. So let me stick to our lane as judicial officers. Every judicial officer's mandate begins with a judicial oath, and it's taken prior to the assumption of duty. In my view, that this is the most fundamental element in our judicial toolkit, as it were. I'll recap it. I know we are lawyers here and other legal practitioners, but I'll recap it. It's found in the first schedule of the Oaths Act, which is chapter 19 of the laws of Uganda. I will read it verbatim. I swear in the name of the Almighty God, or I solemnly affirm that I will well and truly exercise the judicial functions entrusted to me and will do right to all manner of people in accordance with the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda as by law established and in accordance with the laws and usage of the Republic of Uganda without fear or favor, affection, or ill will. And those who believe in God say, so help me God, and the others can affirm. Now, Chief Justice Wambuzi, in his address to magistrates at their swearing in on the 15th of July 1986, and those who are old enough to remember is that that's when the government that is now in office took power. This is what he told their worships. You sought to do right to all manner of people, and all manner means exactly that. Some people, because the absence of knowledge, especially of the specialized kind contained in the toolkit, presents a situation of potential unavoidable injustice. I therefore look forward to being appraised of its content, and I thank UNAIDS, Women's Pro Bono Initiative, and all their partners for their effort in this development. I thank you all for your kind attention for God and my country.
Thank you so much, Honorable Lady Justice Kazari Olive, for that perspective and very detailed presentation. And she shared with us the dilemma that they face while on the bench and dealing with matters or those that involve persons living with HIV. And it was on that background that the Women's Pro Bono Initiative and UNAIDS came together to develop this toolkit, which we are all anxiously waiting for. So at this opportunity, I would like to invite the consultant, Mr. Kavanda David, who has spent the past few days, weeks, and months burning the midnight candle to try and make sure that this toolkit, the first of its kind in this country and probably on the continent, is available for our use and at our disposal. So, Mr. Kavanda David, I'm giving you this time to take us through the toolkit such that the members of both the bench and the bar can be apprised of its contents. I thank you.
My Lord, Honorable Justice of the High Court, Olive Azare Mkwaya, the representative of UNAID, the President, my President, Uganda Law Society, my senior colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a challenge for me to stand here before you, and the person who has given the keynote is Honorable Justice Olive, and I'll be telling you why. A few weeks ago, I met you, Honorable Justice, when again you are working towards social justice. Some of us, that is our career, social justice, right to health, right to food, climate justice. That's where you'll find us most. I appreciate your keynote, especially on the role of the judiciary and the impartiality, and also the last point that there are some spaces of knowledge that keep coming up that the judiciary would need in giving us this desired justice and also doing their work with impartiality. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a 45-page document, but I have come up with a presentation. Allow me to go through the presentation. I promise to keep it short because many of us were part of the validation. It is really disheartening, Your Lordship, that you haven't read the toolkit. I expected that you already went through it, but again, we'll be giving you this toolkit. Where I start from is a quotation from a UNDP 2021 guidance for prosecutors on HIV-related criminal cases. Today we know much more about HIV and scientific developments, mean that HIV need not be a death sentence. With effective antiretroviral treatment, people with HIV can live long, full lives. And this is the most important statement. Advances in treatment mean that people living with HIV can now achieve viral suppression, which prevents transmission, which prevents transmission of the virus to others. Your Lordship, if this is the science, many of our laws are a danger to humanity, I should say. Because if you must prove whether I intentionally put someone at danger or if at all I did, and your only yardstick to aggravate the offense is because I was tested with HIV without even investigating what my viral load is, without even referring to science that is telling us that discordant couples, happen and, positive parents can give birth to negative children when they actually, work together. So everything that needs to be done here is, can we look at the science as judicial officers? Can we go beyond just the text in the legal documents and be able to interrogate further? And why I felt a bit thrown off the ground when I learned that you'll be coming as a keynote is I remember very well when I appeared before you in the Namubiru case. And Namubiru case is also a case in the toolkit that I bring out and lessons to lawyers and judges when such cases come before them. I don't know whether Mr. Counsel Muchibi is here. Then later they took it on in the High Court. So this is the outline of the toolkit, which I don't want to go so much into because I'll later speak to these slides. It brings out the trends, background and rationale, the human rights-based approach, state obligations, relevance of international law and soft law as well, guidelines for management of HIV-related cases, Uganda's legal framework in relation to HIV, AIDS, and human rights, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, HIV, AIDS Prevention Act. This is one of the laws that we don't need. Yes, it has some progressive sections, but when it comes to those other sections where criminalization of HIV stands out as its own, motive and objective, then it defeats the entire purpose. And maybe, my Lord, ever since the law was enacted, we don't have any record of any person that has ever been tried in this law and convicted. Maybe it is a redundant law in as far as those sections are concerned. We have some progressive sections like creating an AIDS trust fund, which we don't know whether actually government has. So maybe some of the laws, as my Lord, you are dispensing justice, they need to be looked at it beyond. I'll be speaking about the penal code, especially section 176, under which many of these cases have been brought. We know when this particular section was enacted into law, very colonial, actually before independence. And the current kind of public health practice that was there is not what we have today. The science then was traditional knowledge or a few advances in science. And here we are with, we have had someone speaking to us and is not here. Maybe this was not the case 100 years ago. And it is a law that we are still holding so high and, implementing. If the mandate of the judiciary comes from the aspirations of the people, then the aspirations must also transcend every lens of a judicial officer and a legal practitioner in determining cases, picking cases to litigate, and or when any matter gets to them for defending. So this is the outline, Your Lordship, and we have expanded. When we were starting, we had not included judicial officers, but we said no, we cannot be feeding ourselves with information, and we are leaving out where we go. Yeah, so we must include judicial officers to be able to also be on the same page with what we know as legal practitioners. Then the toolkit covers international and national development goals. Your Lordship, you know that we are now working within the framework of Sustainable Development Goals. And these goals, Uganda as a government, as a country, has committed to make sure that, it implements. So if we have laws that criminalize and are defeating our efforts to prevent and control HIV/AIDS, then goal number 2, goal number 3, goal number 1, because my Lord, HIV is an economics issue. Many people who are poor find themselves in the jaws of this disease. And you'll also find out that the many people who eventually appear before the judicial officer are always the poor people who having HIV. So this disproportionately affects them. So we specifically looked at Sustainable Development Goals, but we also know as Uganda, we recently have the National Development Plan 3. And in the National Development Plan 3, the first thing, actually the theme, is improved health of all Ugandans and income security. So it cannot happen unless if we are planning for a section of people, like what you said, my Lord, what Justice Wamb said, that some people are poor, others are rich. So you must use a frog's eye view, not a bird eyes view when it comes to specific things. So I think it is already necessary that the judicial officers and legal practitioners, beyond our legal books, we also question the policy, we also question the aspiration of a nation and development plans, such that we don't work in isolation and give out abstract rulings or rulings which we think are fair, but when you interrogate them, you think that maybe a judicial officer or a lawyer ought to have gone beyond that if we are being fair and protecting and trying to cut back on the iniquities. So why do we need HIV legal services? Your Lordship, HIV-related legal services are an essential component of an effective national HIV response. We are making a case, and not only in this toolkit, but UNAIDS. And I want to thank you on behalf of UNAIDS. When you go to read about AIDS and law, you have really tried to come up with very important documents and guidance. That is that my Lord, unless we adopt a human rights-based approach to HIV, we can't get out of this. It is extremely difficult. And I have told people in other fora that I don't know why the lawyers and judicial officers have for so long been left out in the campaigns, in the struggle. Every time when these planners and HIV activists sit to either plan or respond, it is them or the scientists, and they forget the general ecosystem within which society thrives. So I think it is important that the legal services are coming in as central components in this response. They protect and promote human rights of people living with HIV. They are essential to ensure good public health, because if everyone is safe, then everyone is safe. If some of us are not safe, then everyone is not safe. Like, I like what Madame Salome said. I can't control my wife. Now I'm here. I don't know where she is. That's a fact. You may not want to take it in, but it is a fact. maybe I shouldn't use that example. I can use it differently. She doesn't know, okay, she knows that I'm at golf course, but she has no control whatsoever what I'll do here and what I'll do immediately after this place. So as you run away, as you castigate maybe key populations and what, and for me, I have told the people it is not promotion, but we all are human beings. If someone has decided, it's a matter of choice. If they've decided to have sex with men, that has nothing to do with discriminating them or failure to give them the legal services. And I think this is what Justice Wambs was saying, that don't look at their sex orientation, don't look at maybe their height. You consider the legal principles before you. Contribute directly to building an enabling environment, ensure access to HIV prevention. I have had the opportunity to interact in this work, my Lord, and I have gone to villages where you find a woman is lying on the ground and she because of out of stock. Although now we are talking about issues, and I want everyone in this room not to narrow this discussion to criminalization and or person to person, issues. There are wider sector related issues. For example, access to medicine. My Lord, many HIV people, people living with HIV, sometimes cannot access medicines because of stock out. I have ever gone to communities and I found women lying on their deathbed, but because they couldn't get a refill, because after some time you have to go back and they give you more ARVs. But a time comes when these ladies, and when it came to COVID-19, it was horrible. You know all what happened, and I was like, couldn't we do it better? Yes, we are responding to an emergency, but we already are suffering with some other emergency which ought to be, interwoven within an emergency. So, my Lord, I may appear before you challenging either government or a district or a particular duty bearer on the omission, or failure in their duty, because they hold the budget, they hold the commitment, they hold the law on our behalf. But in many instances, they behave as if they don't have a legal duty. So you go to a hospital. We recently finished a human rights violations report with Uganet. Let me hope the Uganet is here. And what we found out in communities is appalling. Law must come into this space if we are all supposed to be running out of it. Because the adolescent girls and young women, at the rate at which they are getting the HIV, is alarming. And unless a nation wakes up to this reality, we are not winning this battle. The trends, I do not go so much into this. Then understanding a human rights-based approach. This is at the bedrock of the toolkit. We think that a human rights-based approach will give better interventions where people participate, including lawyers. And for me, this is my byline. Lawyers or legal practitioners must participate fully. Salome, it is not because we don't want to listen to you, but it is because you've not brought us into your space to participate fully and understand. Some of us understand these issues because at the very beginning of our career, a case like Narozi Namubiru came to us. And the kind of schooling that I got, my Lord, including from international partners, at some point I felt like I was running mad. And at some point I had to run away from the case because of the stigma, because of the too much information that was coming in. I couldn't comprehend it. And at high court, I left it to Mchivi. Go and handle. It was too much. My family was calling, what are you doing with a horrible nurse? In fact, in my own village, they called my mother in the Senior Women's Council they have their informal things. And they called me. I thought they wanted me to speak to them. And said, did we take you to school to become, this horrible? What are you doing with a woman who wanted to end the life of this child? But of course, you talked about media and how media was, how Sudiru Ruhanga brought out the graphics that this nurse was drawing blood and injecting it. So that entire story and narrative was too bad. I suffered stigma for maybe 4 years thereafter. Going forward, the lawyers that we work with have under, what are you doing? No, stop. You are embarrassing us. So the family calls you, is everyone. So the kind of stigma, by the way, if you do this work, you have to get ready to respond or be or opaque on or indifferent on stigma and what people say. But the law needs to protect. Then accountability, where duty bearers must account. Then non-discrimination, transparency in coming up with information and everything. Then human dignity. Persons living with HIV have suffered that indignity, I should say. Article 24 protects them, but that protection is not there. Empowerment, they need to be empowered, and rule of law. A human rights-based approach, my lord, converts needs into justiciable rights. A right is justiciable if it can be presented to and resolved by a court of law, rather than by way of an administrative process. If the court finds that such a right has been violated, it can order a remedy for the violation. Justiciable human rights may be found in the Constitution or in national legislation. The rights-driven approach, my lord, creates obligations that are enforceable, and people can be held accountable for non-performance. For this reason, a rights-based approach is desirable when dealing with HIV-related human rights violations. Because, my lord, you have even the power to issue structural interdict to government. But of course, it takes us as lawyers who bring the cases to the judiciary to also understand and prepare the bench very well. Because you have the power, you can tell, please, Mr. Government, do ABCD on this particular point of time. So international framework, I'll not go so much into it, but we looked at the UDHR, International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, CRPD, ICCR, CEDAW, Maputo Protocol, which is protecting women, the Banjul Charter, our own charter, then the ESC Treaty, and the many policies that have been made at ESC level, a Convention on the Rights of the Child, then General Comment number 14, which expounds on the right to health, CEDAW recommendations for Uganda on discrimination from the perspective of HIV, then General Comment number 12. And this one is dear to me, my lord, because it expounds on the right to food and nutrition. At the center of the response to this particular, pandemic as HIV and AIDS is food security and nutrition. To respond well to the medication and everything, you need food. During COVID-19, many persons living with HIV, by the way, died not because of the disease, but because they didn't have food. And I saw some with my eyes because I'm now into food. Secondly, many young girls, the ones that we are talking about, Salome, get infected because a boda man is giving her a chapati. She left home without food. She went to school, no food. So where does she end? And others are marrying off children because a man will bring food to their home. So all these issues connect, and the law is here to give us the guidance. So we have some guidelines for management of HIV-related cases. General principles. Prosecutions should be informed at all stages by the most reliable evidence. Reliable evidence. Is it in science? If he or she is found with HIV, are you sure that this person transmitted it to him or her? Is it just a gen? Because the law is saying the moment someone has HIV, it is aggravated and everything. Do we stop at that? Can't we go beyond that? Deciding whether and how to prosecute. If someone read this toolkit, I need to manage the time. Then pre-trial and trial considerations. Prosecutors, for example, should generally consent to pre-trial release absent exceptional circumstances. So we have tried to bring out, and we are picking some of these text and information from already, developed guidelines by UNAIDS and UNDP. Uganda's legal framework. I have been speaking about this, my lord, but when you read the entire chapter 4 of our constitution, is speaking to this issue. Then, of course, but I want to particularly pick like Article 20. Article 20, my lord, rights and freedoms shall be respected, upheld, and promoted by all organs and agencies of government and by all persons. So this is the bedrock of, of, of justice, dispensation. So when we look at some of these articles, for example, Article 33, talking about the rights of women, and for me, because I have done a lot of work around maternal health, Article 33.3, it is a legal obligation, a constitutional obligation on the state to protect the rights of women, taking into account their natural maternal functions, and that is sexual and reproductive health, in society. Because I don't have a uterus. I may have sex with a woman, she'll carry the pregnancy. If we are HIV positive, the kind of burden that a woman will have, it's not the burden that I will have. For me, I'll walk away like I have nothing. But for her, the burdens are too many. Carrying the pregnancy, taking care of the child. You see, sometimes you don't need to breastfeed. So who protects this woman? But our constitution already catered for these eventualities. We just need to put our light into them and illuminate and be able to serve humanity. Now we have this elephant in the room, the HIV and AIDS Prevention and Control Act. It is an absurd thing that I'm presenting about this law. Of course, Uganet is already in court challenging these particular sections. We hope that the Constitutional Court can quicken up the hearing. It is now, I think, 5 years ever since we filed the case. I worked with the lawyers then, but it was mentioned in the recent, I think in September, it was mentioned. So we have hope that maybe in the next session, it will be heard. But in this act, criminalization of, intent to transmit and transmission, everything is written like it is in it's like a plain language that HIV is like picking a tomato there and you eat it. It isn't. It is complicated. It is scientific. It is everything. But the law tries to put that down. Then the law talks about informed consent, which can be taken away by the way, because a health worker in the law has the powers to call. Because when you go to test, they'll ask you your immediate partners and they'll record them. You don't know why they are doing that. But eventually they call them, and the law gives them power to tell them you are sleeping with the calendar, but what we saw here, be careful. Yes, when you read the law, yes, it talks about confidentiality, informed consent, but all these things are happening. Then the law, it has some good, sections. It isn't entirely bad. But you see what comes out very strongly are those points, criminalization, confidentiality, and consent. So section 32, forbids discrimination in schools. There is one of the cases that I handled in one of the high-end schools, refusing to admit a child because she has HIV. And we went to the Equal Opportunities Commission, and of course, the then ED pushed for a settlement. and I also agreed. We had no point in, submissions and everything. But you see, the parents could no longer, even when the school said, okay, you can bring the child now. The parents said, how? We can't. Because everyone in the school and in her class, they already, and you see, the weird thing, the child was in the school before. Yeah, now they took her away, and when they brought her again, the school said, no, she has HIV. And yet, they lived with her when they don't know. And some of the teachers are childish. You see, when they deal with children, they become like them. Yes, seriously speaking, the teacher started telling the children in class why. Okay. Then restriction on travel is forbidden in the law. Prohibition from public service. You cannot tell me you can't employ me in public service because maybe I have HIV. Let me tell you, my Lord. 2 months ago, I was 95 kilograms. But now I'm 78. One of the things that I have suffered is stigma related to HIV. I have many friends, family members, and other concerned people inboxing me to start ARVs. This is where the stigma comes. They even don't know what you are working up to. But this is how deep it is rooted in society. Kavanda, you are learned. If you are sick, start ARVs. Simple. The way we see you are sick, Mr. Kavanda, everyone is concerned. And I told them, you guys, I'm okay. I have never felt like this. Maybe I remember I felt like this when I was 19, 20, cutting the weight. And I want to ask all of you to go and test for your body mass index. You'll see wonders happening. Sorry to digress a bit, but I wanted to explain the point. HIV and how the law should come in. Then health centers, protection of children. Then intentional transmission, I have talked about this. Criminalization, I've also talked about this in that particular law. Then other laws, I already talked about the Penal Code Act, that particular section. Every time I think about it, I feel like freaking out. So, because my Rosemary Namubiru was convicted in there. Then the Children Amendment Act, when we look at these issues as lawyers, can we pick particular sections in the Children's Act to protect them and be able to prevent the stigma and discrimination? Public Health Act, but this one is under review. There is a bill in Parliament. It is a 1935 law. And some of these laws, my Lord, we are applying them, but they are that old. For example, the Public Health Act, we have written to government, Uganda law reform. We did some reports, but they seem not to see what we see. But eventually, there is now a bill. We are hopeful that maybe some of the issues that we are talking about will be catered for. We have another, again, very old law, the Food and Drug Act, Equal Opportunities Act, Employment, Local Government. And why we are mentioning these laws in the toolkit is because when a case comes before you as a legal practitioner, you must look at a wider scope of these legal, provisions. Okay, this is what is provided for in the HIV Control and Prevention Act. But what does the Local Government Act say? What does you understand? So that kind of interrogation. Then understanding human rights in key populations. I'll not go so much into this because Madame Solomon really captured it. We have issues. Like she said, some of the children are taking drugs and parents don't know. It is of recent that some parents have realized how their children are behaving. Others are committing suicide because they don't want to open up. They think that I'm going to be judged and everything. These things are happening. There are even couples, my Lord, who think that they are heterosexual between man and woman, but other colleague is having extra affairs in a gay relationship. and it isn't only men, but also women. In working in these circles, I recently did M&E for Elton George Foundation, and I was dealing specifically with key populations. And I met women who said, for us, it is a non-start of a man, and I'm in that marriage because I need the social protection and the money, and I gave birth to children. But the affection is with my fellow colleague, a woman. So as we handle these cases as lawyers, as judges, we need not to be judgmental, and we do not need to be biased by our sexual orientation, because we just need to look at human beings and leave them to have their choices. When people came in here and they said there is breakfast, you cannot force me to eat what isn't my choice. Like, okay, I may sound derogatory when I speak about that food, and many of you have already eaten, but maybe that will be another day. HIV-related legal services and the Human Rights Enforcement Act. Lawyers, legal practitioners, judges, and other justice actors, we have a new beautiful tool. I sometimes read this law, the Human Rights Enforcement Act, my lord, and I wonder whether the president read it before he signed it. It is too good, and sometimes when I read it, I have a second thought about the president. It's like, if he read this text and he signed this law, then he means something good for the wananchi. This law allows anyone to come to court if their rights have been infringed, and it actually brings down these other legal concepts that we learned. Someone can frame anything, and they bring it under this act. So we have put it in the toolkit, so lawyers and judicial officers can be able to see. I don't want to go back to Namubiru because I have talked about Namubiru so much. But lessons about Namubiru's case are also in the toolkit. Then the toolkit also mentions many cases, but my lord, allow me to highlight this case, Komuhanji Sylvia versus Uganda, Criminal Appeal number 19 of 2019. It was decided by your land brother, Justice Mubiru. When the case came before him, it had these very bad facts, and the case the woman was convicted at magistrate's level. But when Justice Mubiru was looking at, because the allegation was that this woman had pricked the child that she was carrying, and she's HIV positive. A little similar to Namubiru, but these were different because these were friends, and she was in the home. And when these people came, I think the girl had a cat, and they made a conclusion that it is this woman who had pricked her. And when she was tested, she was found positive. This is what Justice Mubiru on appeal said. For the spread of an infection of disease that is dangerous to life to be considered likely, there should be evidence laid before court showing that infection in such circumstances is not merely fanciful, remote, or possible, but rather that it is statistically significant and almost certain. It should not be a result that is likely to arise due to mere chance. And this is where many people go. They immediately convict you the moment you are HIV positive. Of course, my lord, we are not saying that HIV positive people should go on the spree infecting others. They are those people, and it could be a case by case. But this general feeling that the moment someone is HIV positive, it is a death sentence, I think it should stop. The prosecution, therefore, had to establish that pricking the child with a needle or other sharp object in the circumstances of this case was an act that had the effect of exposing the child to the significant risk of infection of disease that is dangerous to life, HIV/AIDS. and that is Justice Mubiru. It is a beautiful judgment. My Lord, I want to encourage my colleagues here, when you get time to go through it, to school ourselves about these issues. He further emphasized that prosecuting individuals for behavior, Council Mobiru, thank you, Muchibi, thank you for coming. Prosecuting individuals for behavior or activities that pose no, negligible or low risk of HIV exposure, and third, unlikely to lead HIV infection when using condoms when an individual has a low or undetectable. You see, this is where he is now leading. Low viral load, low viral load, undetectable, and transmissible. It is the science that we have. If someone has, suppressed the virus to a level that it can't even be detected, this is why public health practitioners have told people, don't wake up and celebrate that I got cured of HIV because you went to Pastor X. It is maybe the medicine that you are taking that is suppressing it to a level that it is not detectable, but it is there. The moment you relax, it definitely comes back. So this is where he is leading and saying, okay, can we have evidence that biting or a slightest penetration or just a single penetration or something can lead to HIV infection? So we have other cases, my Lord, that we mentioned in the toolkit, Oloko Nyango and 9 others versus Attorney General, the AHA case. Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum versus Attorney General. It is a recent case. It is a COVID case, my Lord. I was in Chitalia when these people were being released. I was also getting out women who had been chased off the street because they were selling oranges. Then we have this animal called the Anti-Pornography Act, or call it the mini-skirt. The Constitutional Court has declared many of its sections unconstitutional. Then we have key aspects for legal service providers. Human rights, and this, let me go just quickly through them. Discrimination on grounds of HIV, gender including HIV-related disability, illicit drug use and sex work, problems accessing treatment, care and support, problems involving breaches of privacy and confidentiality, violence against women, forced or unknown sterilization and forced abortion. You know that many women are being sterilized because of their status. So these are issues that lawyers need to be looking at. Legal service providers must never proceed on inaccurate assumptions, subjective biases, speculation, or prejudice. This is a key message to all of us. Simply because a person is HIV positive does not automatically mean they are able to transmit HIV. I think we have done justice to that point. Simply having been given an HIV positive test does not mean a person is necessarily aware of how HIV can and cannot be transmitted. Spitting poses no risk of HIV transmission. Biting poses no or at most negligible risk of HIV. This is UNAIDS. If we belong to the United Nations network, this is what the science is bringing out. It is not the case any form of sexual activity necessarily poses a risk of HIV transmission. Exposure to HIV does not necessarily lead to actual infection. It cannot be assumed that a person living with HIV who engages in sex or other activity that may pose a risk of transmission. And this is the conclusion. My Lord, I'm very sorry. When you asked me, I had promised to use 15 minutes. But the moment I learned that the toolkit was not with you prior, I decided to go through these slides because I felt like we needed to do this. Our conclusion is that a human rights-based approach is the silver bullet. They call it a silver bullet that we have in response and also prevention of HIV. As a global community, as a global village, I think there is consensus that when the cases of HIV come before us as legal practitioners, the first thing that we should put on table is human rights. And it is not that we want criminals to get off hook, but if you use human rights based approach, again, criminals will be netted because you'll get them. In communities where violations of human rights are not protected, my lord, people are more vulnerable to HIV infection. If communities are not protected, if the girls are not protected, if the law is not doing its work, then vultures are taking advantage. And you see, I've started my load for now the last 2 years. If I find a case of rape or defilement, for me, I leave the criminal part and I do the civil part. To some judicial officers, they find it extremely difficult because it has that element of proving some of the facts beyond reasonable doubt. But you see, the criminal justice system does not give clear or correct remedy to the victim. I have been raped. I have been left in the community. And what happened? This guy may go to prison for 10 years. So what for me? Nothing. So for me, what I do a civil case. If it is in the girl's favor, if it is in Kavanda and the girl's favor, because definitely I sue with the girl, then I'll ask for general and special damages exemplary. They have to sell their plots of land, or if he has a border or he has what, to compensate this woman. If she has to relocate, you see, sometimes we don't think about these issues. A girl may want to relocate from a village where she has been known to have been raped by a person X, because the kind of social capital you have is already reduced to zero. Some of the girls thrive because men will marry them, but the entire village now knows that someone raped you. Who now protects you? The law is silent. It looks at the the criminal punishment, and they don't look at this girl. It should be noted that failure to protect human rights of HIV positive people, then PLHIV suffer stigma and discrimination, become ill, become unable to support themselves and their families, and if not provided treatment, they die. Therefore, adopting a human rights-based approach is the key in care, prevention, and treatment of HIV. Thank you so much, colleagues. Sorry for taking some more minutes.
Thank you so much, our consultant, Mr. David Kabanda, for that very detailed presentation of our toolkit. And by now, at least all of you in this room and those who have been attending with us online have a picture of what the toolkit is about. We do apologize that the copies which are being circulated are not enough because they were being made in haste, and therefore we did not make enough copies. But we have promised that we are going to make enough copies for the entire country, because this is a toolkit that is going to be used by the entire country. I noticed that we are way within our time, and right about now, we are going to have the technical experts weigh in on this toolkit. I noticed that midway Mr. Kabanda's presentation, Advocate Paul Mukibi walked in, and he will be giving us a bit of the perspective on the toolkit. But before he does come, I will invite someone from the office of the DPP, and that is the Senior State Attorney, Mr. Jonathan Mugwanya, who will be giving us a bit of perspective on this toolkit. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for this invitation. My Lord Justice Olive Bukazare and my friend, Mr. David Kavanda, who I must concede has done a very great job. Madam Salome from UNA. Advocate Muchibi is here, with whom we have been working behind the scenes. My name is Jonathan Muwaganya. The people from Central region tend to confuse my name with Mugwanya, but I'm actually Muwaganya. I am a chief state attorney in the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. I've worked in a number of stations across the country, in the east, in the north, in central. But right now, I am doing assignments at our head office. I appreciate all of you, ladies and gentlemen, in your respective capacities for taking off time to be here today. I have had the pleasure myself to do some peer review. I attended the validation online, and now we are here for the dissemination process. My role is not really as tedious as Mr. Kavanda's. So I'm just going to give a few remarks from my perspective. Now, we must all understand that HIV AIDS is here to stay. It came uninvited. It was not within our powers. The same way, it is not within our powers to have it go completely. I guess that is going to be the same scenario with COVID. So it is important as practitioners to have a human rights space in all legal decisions that we make, legal and policy decisions that we make. A scenario that is not about to leave us. Now, I've been practicing for the last 14 years. When I started prosecutions, work was all about attaining a conviction. And you would put all your youthful energy into ensuring that somebody gets convicted. Now, time has taught me, and many of us, of course, that it's not anymore about getting convictions, and it is about many other considerations. The major one of it being justice. And justice does not necessarily mean that people are convicted. No. It is wider than that. So it is important that we work towards removing all legal barriers for HIV/AIDS victims, especially in the arena of accessing justice. I believe that this toolkit is a positive way towards that direction. And I want to commend whoever has put in their resources to ensure that it is done. A lot has been said about Section 171 of the Penal Code that relates to doing negligent acts like that spread infectious diseases. I need not belabor. That section, just like many other criminal sections, need not exist on our penal laws. But Mr. Kawanda, you know that there is Section 129, subsection 3(4)(b) of the Penal Code. the section that aggravates a defilement that would otherwise be simple to aggravated just by the mere fact that the offender is HIV positive. And you see, that section is even worse because the law as it is now does not require that there was actual transmission. Just merely the offender being positive can earn somebody a death sentence for an offense that would have looked at it differently. So as you are questioning section 171, also let us pay attention to section 129, 3, 4, and B of the penal code. And these are just a few of the many other laws that, as opposed to facilitating justice, instead promote injustice to a certain section of members of our society. The HIV/AIDS prevention law, I want to believe that this law was promoted from civil society. You know, most of these human rights laws are promoted. And I also keep wondering what happened. I these days do some work with Attorney General's chambers, because I am as well the liaison officer of our office with AG's chambers. And that is how I learned that most of the laws that you see Parliament passing are funded, promoted by civil society. So, as somebody wondered where lawyers were, I'm actually also wondering the promoters, what they really intended. Of course, every law is promoted by some society, section of society. So what the promoters of that law were up to. From a prosecutor's point of view, I know that when this toolkit is finally distributed to every prosecutor, every investigator, judges and magistrates, defense counsel, and all other justice actors, that we will have a clear basis to look at things differently in this area. Of course, Mr. Kavanda has helped us with the overview of the toolkit, and you can see that clear provisions have been made for many of our local laws on the subject and other relevant international conventions to which Uganda is a party that are relevant. But in addition, you've done us justice by providing sample cases that have been decided in our jurisdiction, as well as relevant literature. So in simple terms, you have made our work as practitioners simple and easy. So the question perhaps we should be asking ourselves is, after the launch of this toolkit, what next? My understanding is that this is going to make the beginning of even a greater work for us as duty bearers. Her Lordship made us a wonderful quote of our former CJ. I believe that it's our duty to ensure that people should achieve justice not necessarily based on how the size of their pockets. And these days, it is not only about size of their pockets, but you will bear witness with me that it has extended to the size of guns that people carry, the size of connections that people carry. So obstacle to justice now is much beyond financial corruption. May God help our country. So more work, Mr. Kavanda, is going to entail pushing for legal reforms, because now we have a basis that legal provisions that are repugnant to good sense are repealed from our penal laws. And you know, I have a problem of our policymakers pulling out piecemeal areas for legal reform. Our entire criminal justice system needs complete overhaul. And I believe her lordship will agree that whereas people are crying about bail, bail is just a small component of the problem. So much that you may reform bail and then tomorrow you find another obstacle. So we need, in my view, collective approach. So pushing for legal reform, yes. Where legal reform is beyond us, because we don't sit in parliament. Then we should look towards institution of strategic litigation. And I'm glad other organizations are already doing it. But strategic litigation aimed at annulment of laws that are a hindrance to access to justice to people living with HIV. If I made a census in this room and asked that whoever does not have an HIV positive person in their family or in their network to stand up, I believe you will all remain seated. So this is something that is about us, something that is real. But besides legal reform and strategic litigation, we need continuous advocacy for policy change. A shift from criminalization of acts of conduct towards the development approach. What I have not told you, Mr. Kavanda, before is that besides being a criminal prosecutor, I am also a development lawyer, because that is where I specialized at master's level. And quite life transforming. That other than us, and by us I mean everybody, because we all have a role to play. Other than us doing things to fault and punish, we should do things to prevent people from committing the vices that criminal law aims at curing. Like these laws that we are dealing with that are discriminatory are aimed at, in the mind of the legislator, preventing people from infecting other innocent people, isn't it? We can do things different. For example, if we handled the question of education, how many educated women and youth are as vulnerable as the chaps in our villages that this law is aiming at? If you address that question, we can achieve much more. We address the question of employment. Those people you are talking about on Speak Road, how many of them are formally employed? How many people in formal employment or decent employment can risk that trade, engaging in that trade? If we can intentionally cause civilization, but our societies have largely remained primitive, probably deliberately. Because, development does not happen by accident. Development is intentional. Facilities can be provided to prevent other than firefight. Because criminal laws are basically for firefighting. You do this, you suffer this. But if we can prevent, much better. By way of conclusion, for me, like I said, I have had the pleasure to read every sentence of your work. I have probably had an input. And I'm very grateful for Women Pro Bono Initiative for this undertaking. I'm also grateful to UNAIDS and obviously Mr. Kavanda and the rest of the other peer reviewers. Paul is here, who happens to be my classmate. And I'm not sure that Dora came, who is also a classmate. I don't know how it happened coincidentally that people from the same class found themselves doing the same role in this regard. I'm also grateful to the parties, each party that has done whatever positive things towards the realization of the toolkit. And I highly recommend that upon its launch today by Her Lordship, that we widely distribute it for use, because it's going to be going to lay a firm foundation for greater work. I want to thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muaganya. My sincere apologies for the pronunciation earlier. Chief State Attorney, and you've had his perspective on this toolkit, considering that the office of the DPP is the one that does the prosecution. This is a very, very, very important remarks that he has given us. So right about now, we are going to have remarks, technical expert perspective from Advocate Paul Muchivi, who also happens to have participated behind doors in the creation of this toolkit. So Mr. Paul Muchivi, you'll have just a few minutes to make your presentation, and thereafter I'll open it up to everyone. Just a few people who will be having anything to say here physically, and maybe just a few people online. You could prepare. We shall just spend a few minutes hearing what you have to say about this toolkit, and thereafter we shall invite Her Lordship to officially launch this toolkit. So, Mr. Muchivi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, MC. My Lord, colleagues present, Mr. Jonathan, the Chief State Attorney, thank you so much for the remarks. Mr. Kavand, I think, has moved out a bit, the consultant. Thank you for this initiative, and I'm also glad to note that WPI also honored me to be part of this exercise. I appreciate so. I'm Paul Muchivi by name. I'm a head law reporting, research, and law reform law development center. Much of my work is research, publication, and legal practice. The secretary, editorial board of the Uganda Law Reports. That's the official reports in Uganda. And I'm also an editor of the Uganda Living Law Journal of Uganda Law Reform Commission, as well as an editor of the Uganda Law Society Law Journal. So I'm majoring in publication and research, and I do a lot of editing. And if you give me a book, even if 5 times, I will not fail to find errors in it, even at this level. But the errors cannot stop us from moving forward. Work in progress is better than being there without progressing. I'm very excited for this opportunity. I must mention that we have prosecutors present. Mr. Jonathan has just left the floor. Practitioners like myself present, who are always on the defense side. We also have our leadership, who is adjudicating the other side. And that makes, even if we have the public that may be part of either the suspects or the accused or the convicts, whichever case. So it makes a lot of sense when we are in this kind of environment and discussing this toolkit. I must mention why I'm so excited is because one of the leading cases leading to this toolkit is Rosemary Namubiru, which myself and Counsel Kavanda defended before her lordship, then as chief of the court. It is a very exciting moment, and it shows that we can still work together wherever you are to develop the law and to develop jurisprudence. That is something very good. On 4th November, we had a validation exercise, as Counsel Jonathan has mentioned, and a lot of feedback was given. I gave some concerns I had about the toolkit, and I've been informed by the executive of the WPI. They are working on those comments. And finally, by the time the final product will be out, we shall have them all captured. I must note that this toolkit should not stop at this level. I think WPI should think of also justice bench book. I tell you, this is one of the work we are doing, developing justice bench books. I think it can move at a larger scale. We translate it into a justice bench book. We are having so many areas that are lacking. They are lacking jurisprudence in our legal system. 2 weeks ago, we were also on a validation exercise of the justice bench book on trafficking in persons. Trafficking in person. And it was very interesting because it is being developed majorly by our female justices of the bench. And I was representing the director LDC in that validation meeting. And a lot was discussed because that bench book is trying to bring in civil remedies, a product of criminal prosecution. And there was a question of execution, which was very interesting. So, equally here, I think the toolkit has to be further developed from this level to another level, like a justice bench book. Secondly, disseminating what is here will not stop at the information hearing. We need to give it wide dissemination in form of research and publication. Recently, the Law Society made a call for papers and abstracts. And among the papers we are currently peer reviewing, there is no study in this area. There is no single study. What is that showing? Is it there is no problem? Which is not the case. So we have really to contribute and build knowledge in this area. I'm aware, Jonathan has mentioned about Dora. I saw Dora on the program. Uganet. Uganet is developing a justice bench book on HIV litigation. I'm also part of the group in that. So it is something that is discussing most of the decisions in Uganda we've handled. At least most of the decisions in Uganda captured in this toolkit have been cancelled. And There is one decision we are lacking, which I think it hasn't been typed, was before Justice Stephen Mubiru. And this is Mr. Kavanda consultant, something I also thought needed an input. What about juvenile justice in matters concerning with HIV? We had a case before Justice Mubiru, High Court of Uganda at Gulu, where a juvenile of around 11 or 12 years infected another juvenile with HIV, and the decision brings out a lot. Prosecuting that case and defending that case wasn't very easy. It was not easy at all. So these are the gray areas we are talking about that need to be contained in some of this documentation to guide the bar and the bench on how to move forward. I'm still following up the decision to see that it is typed. It has a lot of jurisprudence. The case was the Uganda versus Oyorotol. Is Oyorotol, and the other name I've forgotten, but I have at least the details. So there's something to do with juvenile justice vis-a-vis HIV, AIDS litigation. It's something we should think of in the future. I understand this is first edition. Perhaps maybe second edition can address that. Then also issues to do with the punishments or sentencing in areas of this nature. That's why in the validation, we talked about Justice Kabi's 6 C's, giving HIV prosecution a human face. I think that is something very important. We should also be interesting the bar and the bench to avoid a lot of commotion in this kind of area. I'm happy that the consultant exhaustively covered the Human Rights Enforcement Act in this toolkit, and I think there is a lot to get from the Human Rights Enforcement Act. We are having a training last week where Professor Mbazira presented about so far cases that have been litigated under the Act. And the question was whether the Act has been adhered to. It's also another interesting question. But what we are noticing that there is progress since we have the law. How now to implement the law is another issue, and it is still our role. So as we move forward, I think there is a lot. This is good progress to set the ball rolling, but we still have a lot to do. And it's you and me who are always in court facing these challenges that can contribute to knowledge and can contribute to information to guide others. So I welcome the idea and I welcome what the consultant has done. And I think we can build from this and extend the discussion until we make this area clear and more focused. So thanks so much. And I must end by saying thank you, WPI. Thank you, consultant. Thank you, Her Lordship, for honoring this exercise. I think no better adjudicator would have been here other than Her Lordship, because she started that controversial case. Her decision, we appealed and the court upheld it, upheld the conviction. But the court made also some other good observations that really, I think, are good to be captured in this toolkit as the consultant has done. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Advocate Paul Muchivi, for those words. And the Women's Bono Initiative has taken note of the request to have or develop a bench of the Justice Bench book. It will be considered. So we are now going to have a short plenary discussion, and we shall start with the people here in the room. Then we shall just have a few comments from online, and thereafter we shall have the official launch of this toolkit. So for those who want to weigh in the discussion, I don't know if there's another microphone, but if there is none, I can move around with this one. You could just tell us your name and maybe the comments or what you think about the discussion here. There's a second microphone here. And this is what we shall be using. So if there's anyone who wants to weigh in on this, to say anything, you could just raise your hand and I move this microphone closer to you so you can be able to make a presentation on something. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I would love to thank so much Mr. Kavanda, the researcher, who has really endeavored to come up with such a wonderful document. Mine is just simple. I would love to just recommend that next time TASO should be included. I'm not from TASO. I'm Timothy Sebibiri. I'm working with Think Tank Center for Health and Human Rights, Touch Rights. When I recommend TASO, I am trying to put a light on the maturity of work kind of thing, because TASO has been around and has a lot to share. The other thing was Mr. Kavan talked about people being exposed. People at risk. Someone may not transmit the virus to the victim, but a lot of punitive actions are taken. I just wanted to let him understand that once someone is at risk of the infection, there are drugs which are administered to that person for a period of 3 months. And that 3 months is quite, hard time for this person. And in case of any punishment, I believe it is really valid. When I was still working with people living with HIV, there are regimens in art, the drugs which are given to the patients. And one of the regiment was effervescence, which was quite challenging to people living with HIV. So being on effervescence for 3 months was quite hard. And if you could put your foot in that person's shoes, you would really feel bad. So if the perpetrator is not taken into custody, it would be a disservice, I believe. That is what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments, Richard. And is there anyone who has anything else? I believe Mr. Kavanda has taken note of those comments and the Women's Pro Bono initiative. I don't know if there is anyone online who is putting up their hand. Could just help me check. Is someone who wants to make a comment? Thank you. Your name and the comment.
My name is Mabel Musings from Uganda National Health Consumers Organization. My question goes to, thank you so much, presenters. My question goes to maybe the Women Pro Bono initiative regarding the implementation of the toolkit. We have not had the specific actions of implementing this action point. And maybe if we could sort of develop some tools to track some of the violations that are happening so that different partners can come in to identify those issues, and then at some point we come up with sort of discussion and maybe resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mabel. Maria, you're going to have to answer that question on the dissemination, the specifics of the dissemination in your closing remarks before the launch. Another comment from here as we go to the online audience later.
Thank you very much. My name is Mwesi Habagaya. I want to thank Her Lordship, the researcher, Mr. Kabanda, and all the other partners that has participated. I'm sorry to say, but the toolkit is too much of law. It's too much of law. We are from different professions. Maybe the researcher and Women's Pro Bono Initiative, is there any way to kind of should we say domesticate the language of the toolkit? Two, maybe the question goes to Women in Promotion Initiative. How best are we going to have kind of multi-sectoral dissemination? Because here, one of the presenters hinted on the parliament, because it's where the issues come, organized, and then forwarded for review and pending signatures. How do we bring on different sectors? Because I'm looking at here, there's judiciary, there is police. There are a number of issues when it comes to filing cases, following up. By the time we get to lawyers, we have probably engaged with the police, and at that level, somehow we have lost energy, feeling like this case does not make any sense, so it may not even proceed to courts of law. So I think police internal affairs is a key player here. And then I'm happy that some of the civil society organizations are here, but also we need to broaden at district level. We are looking, if you're talking about HIV at district level, you're looking at community development, you're looking at the DHT, the district health team, and also the political wing, because the political wing in most cases have been key in either allowing or supporting the case to proceed legally, or being diverted at community level where certain kind of negotiations have taken place. Some, including the politicians directly, some of them indirectly. So they're also key in this particular issue. Then the other last stakeholder is the parent. That's why I was talking about the law. The law, which is too much here. So how do we make parents know or get aware of what is happening, the new trend that we are taking, so that our children are safe and ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moisi and Rahom. I hope you've taken note of those comments, so you'll address them. So one last person from here, then we can have maybe two people from the online audience.
Thank you, presenter Mr. Kavanda, for that very, very elaborate, insightful, presentation. For me, I'll be very, very brief, unlike Mr. Moise, who was, rotating around. How do we make this booklet much user-friendly to the communities at the grassroots? I think it was produced to ensure that the grassroots people benefit out of this of the booklet. It's too much legal language in it. Maybe it's the lawyers who will benefit much out of it, but if you want to draw a big scope of beneficiaries, the human rights workers at the grassroots, you need to make it available and easily accessible. And also maybe look at the other point of translating the booklet into local dialects to widen the scope of. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Just a quick one. Mr. Kabanda and team, thank you for the work well done. Just one key issue. I love the fact that you do make mention of the Rosemary Namobiru case. And I thought from that particular case, you'd give us another subtopic on gender considerations while litigating such cases. Because if you notice, most of us in our areas of practice, we just go for the law and forget these other considerations. And I feel it's important for legal practitioners now to apply a social lens, like the gentleman mentioned, but also apply a gender lens in some of these cases. And also to WPI. Let's not take one of our colleagues' comments so lightly on with regard to implementation challenges. I have been part of quite quite a number of initiatives such as this, and they end up in their beautiful books and they go nowhere. So I think we need to, at the end of this session, come up with, I don't know, some sort of way forward work plan. Do we have a referral mechanism? How can we work together with the bench, bar, and how can we take this conversation forward? Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. So we shall have the comment from the person who is putting up his hand, from Westj Brian. Westj Brian, please unmute and give your comment.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and the presenter, Mr. Kavanda. That was a well thought out document. Two things here. One, my view is that to handle this issue of HIV, this requires what I would call a surgical analysis, and this requires dissecting every small bit of anything that attaches this. And members have raised the issue to do with reaching out to the grassroots person. And now I've been here asking myself, this looks like a hybrid, or call it a VIP argument when we are presenting here. It looks like we are so up the ladder than the local person who's actually supposed to benefit. Now, my view is away from the law and the recommendations within the documents, which are obviously well elaborate. But I wanted us to be alive to the fact that most of these victims do not reach at this stage where this document is, and the stage of the law. Talk about the stage of the courts themselves. They don't actually go there. These things die within the local limits. I've had an interaction with my work with refugees here to the grassroots person who doesn't even report anything. So my view is away from that. Can't we also envisage things like sensitization, meetings to the ground? Where is my local chairperson in this battle? Where is my LC1 chairperson? Those village committees to do with health, children, where is that? Where is my school teacher on this platform? Where is that headmaster of that school that will sensitize? Where are those meetings with students, counseling sessions? Could we also engage those? They look small, but they actually tackle the real person. They actually, and then, yes, if it graduates to the point of now the courts, then the lawyers can weigh in and argue. But if we are to tackle the local, the most affected person, who actually don't even come to these courts, we need to carry out these things that are away from the legal lines, sensitization, educating the masses. The organizations involved could join in, then call upon government to enter deep down these villages and address that. Because if we address the challenge at the grassroots level, assure you me, we shall not have to fight. We no longer want those. We don't need that much legal argument up there. They never even come.
Okay,
Thank
you
you
so
very
much,
much.
Brian. I'll take a comment from the two people who are raising their hands, starting with Kansime, then Francis. Please keep your comments very short such that we can conclude. Kansime first, then
thank you very much, Patrick and Women Pro Bono Initiative for putting this together. We appreciate. My comments on the toolkit are that it's certainly perhaps it's very timely for us to be having this conversation, because mostly of the issues of criminalization around HIV and AIDS, and how our reluctance as a nation to approach HIV from the human rights.
I think we've lost Kansime. Okay, he's trying to come back on. Okay, Kansime is back on.
I'm sorry, I temporarily left. I was saying I think it's a very timely toolkit for us to be having this conversation, because it's a very timely toolkit and therefore an important time for us to be having this conversation, because now is a good time, especially even in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, to actually ask ourselves what is the correct strategy to deal with pandemics, what's the correct strategy to deal with public health issues, what's the correct strategy to deal with those things. Because in the end, we look at it and realize that governments no longer care about human rights-based approach to some of these challenges. So this toolkit is timely, and we hope that it will go a long way in addressing the bottlenecks of this fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kansime. I will now have the last comment from Francis, whose hand was up. Francis, you have just 1 minute.
Good morning to you all. I'm called Francis Mugabe. I'm a lawyer by profession. I wanted to respond a little bit to what Mr. Thomas has raised. And he was speaking basically about the toolkit being too sophisticated for the 1 inch, what I should say, or the people on the ground, people who are suffering from this problem. But my thinking is that this toolkit is to help us, the professionals, be able to disseminate these services to the people who are affected. This toolkit is not necessarily for the people on the ground, people who are suffering from these problems, to understand and analyze. Yes, it could be to their benefit to do so, but just like in the legal profession.
Sorry, we have lost Francis. Sorry, we have lost Francis. And I guess we need to close our plenary session at this point because we are running out of time. So we're going to have closing remarks from the Women's Pro Bono Initiative. And when Maria comes to make her closing remarks that will include addressing the few comments that were pointed out, she will invite her lordship to officially launch this toolkit. And as we told you, the copies are not enough at the moment, but Maria will explain to you how the dissemination is going to be done, because the intention is that this toolkit should reach at least every legal practitioner and legal service providers across the country. So Maria, please make haste, and we do conclude on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The moderator has given me 5 minutes to perform a miracle. Yes. So the first issue I'll address concerning dissemination is that the dissemination, this is just the start of the process. This launch is just the beginning. This is not the end of it all. We're going to have the copy launched on our website online, but also other websites with our partners, UNAIDS. So we're going to have copies publicly open to the online. Then we're also going to have print copies for the start, 1,500. And that is in support with UNAIDS, and we thank our partners very much for that financing. Now, the issue of broad and multi-sectoral approach, it's a very valid point. And in this toolkit, we try as much as possible to broaden the multi-sectoral approach, but also with relevance in as much as something is practically doable. The toolkit, yes, is for legal professionals, but also people who are going to be in legal-related services, that's including paralegals. So this toolkit will have, it's something that's sustainable beyond the launch. It's something that's going to be written. It's something that's in hard print. It's something that's in soft print. Even after we're long gone, it's sustainable. It's going to remain here. And it's something that's in soft copy. We have seen first edition. So information keeps coming up. The science keeps evolving. And even the people who get this knowledge, the gap keeps narrowing. The knowledge gap keeps narrowing. So we need to understand the concept of progressive realization. Every time we're telling the government progressive realization is not an excuse, but when you're standing from this end, it's something that you understand now. That this is a process that we believe with our partners, not only people present in this room, but people who will get hands on this toolkit, but also the information from this toolkit, they'll be able to implement some of these things. Some people registered their apologies. They couldn't be present because of the situation scare, and that is very understandable. This streaming is going to be available on our YouTube channel. It will be there constantly, so they can get to stream about it. But also, we are partnering with ULS. ULS has very many offices present nationally. We hope to have the toolkit disseminated hard copy in different centers, but also for online access. We hope we have a way where we can share it also with the ULS to have it available on their website. Also, our ED doubles as a chairperson of the Female Lawyers Committee. So she also serves in the ULS. So it's something that we can broaden. Then also the Judicial Service Commission has a training, the Judicial Service Training Institute. So it will be part and parcel of this. The prisons were not involved being present here because of the timelines and everything, but the multi-sectoral approach is something that you can realize it growing after some time, that these issues will get to them. And this is something that we have not done behind closed doors. It's out there in the open. So the information shall reach people. That I'm sure of. It shall reach the people. It's just the process of progressive realization. I know there are lives that matters. Lives are not statistics, but we're working on it. Then the other issue was on gender considerations. Yes, and we understand that these are issues that need to be tackled from the grassroots, that is in the academic sector. If you look at even the Law Development Center, how the educational curriculum is structured, it's mainly practiced in the 4 areas of land, criminal law, commercial and corporate practice, family. But going into the specifics of gender is something that's not present at the Law Development Center, but it's something we can push for. That is why we have someone from LDC also present. Is there another point I have not addressed? Yes. So we are behind schedule. My 5 minutes are up. So I'll invite the moderator to guide us.
Thank you so much, Maria. You can just stay here. We're now going to, at this point, invite Her Lordship to come forward and officially launch this toolkit. Please clap for Her Lordship. So Her Lordship will just give us maybe a word or two. Okay. So I'll invite the consultant, the representative from the Women's Pro Bono Initiative, and Her Lordship to stand at the front. And I'll invite the representative from the Office of the DPP. Advocate Muchivi has... Yes? Advocate Muchivi, I think he has moved out. Yeah, maybe any other person who has the copy. Yeah, so at this very... So we shall now invite Her Lordship to officially launch. the toolkit.
Okay. So it's my honor to launch the HIV-related legal services toolkit for legal practitioners, judicial actors, human rights defenders, persons living with HIV, and populations at risk of HIV. I hereby launch the toolkit.
Thank you so much, Your Lordship. And you can just have a few photo moments and then resume your seats. So if there's anyone who has copies, you could just come to the front and we just have the photo moment with Her Lordship. Yes. Photo moment with Her Lordship is it's not every day that you get such opportunities. Again, thank you so much for those who have been present, both online and physically. We have come to the end of this breakfast engagement, and our toolkit has been officially launched. So the very last thing on our agenda is departure, which is at leisure. The Women's Pro Bono Initiative, together with UNAIDS, has prepared a very modest transport refund. And as you take your leave, you could just pass by the desk and to be able to handle that sector. And for our online audience, I hope you captured your details in the chat room. We shall also have a very modest data refund for you. Thank you so much for coming, and we are very, very, very thankful. Have yourselves a good day.